So, as was pointed out, I tend to throw rocks in our industry. How many of you know me on the LinkedIn side of the world? Okay, yeah. So I put a post out at about 2 o'clock this morning. I was a little spicy this morning, and I'm actually going to talk about it. I'm not going to talk about this just yet for a second, because I'm going to talk about this. I got off the phone. I was on the phone with an extremely good friend of mine who works in this industry. She is an accomplished CISO. She's fucking awesome. And she's former agency and all this kind of good stuff. And yet, she spent an hour and a half, 2 hours last night chewing my ear off because we, as people, don't seem to understand what no means. Specifically, the testosterone-laden males in the industry do not necessarily understand what the hell no means. So let's just put it this way. The post last night was spicy, involved rusty scissors and blades and a lime-filled pit. Oh, goody. Yay, thank you. Now I don't have to, because I don't fit back there. So here is my ask. When somebody of the same or opposing sex, depends entirely upon your viewpoints on the world, says no, for fuck's sakes, listen to them. First time they say no. Understood? Thank you. I think I'm going to have to open with that for a little while on various other things as well. Anyway, so on with this. Nowhere left to hide. We're going to have some fun. We're going to break shit because, well, that's what it is. All right, first easy, simple agenda. But quick intro into this lunatic, the hairy thing that's up in front. A little bit of background about why humans and keyboards do and don't work nicely together. We're going to have a conversation about cabins in the wood, that nice idea of us being able to escape to a cabin in the wood. Well, we're going to toast that, let's face it. Then we're going to have a conversation about light bulbs, because light bulbs are fun, and I've had some fun research with light bulbs. And then we're going to have a conversation about what the heck do we do to fix things. As an attacker and as a hacker, my job isn't just to break things, but it's also to come forward and say, hey, look, here's what we broke, and here's a few ways we can fix it. You're very well standing there going, hey, I can break everything in this world, and quite honestly, we don't need to because we know we can break everything anyway. The idea that we all need to come forward and go, hey, here's what I did, and here's 3 or 4 options on how we can fix it. That is basically what we try to figure out. So anyway, this be me, CISO over Boom Supersonic. Been there about a year and a half. It was an interesting interview. The first interview was like, hey, how do you fancy securing basically carbon fiber lawn darts? And I'm like, sold. Researcher, tinkerer, geek, hacker, and I'm a father. I'm a father mostly these days to 4-legged things. For those of you that know me, every now and again when I'm online, this large hairy thing, otherwise known as 3 Great Danes, will wander across, say hi, slobber on the keyboard, steal snacks from me, and leave slobber all over my clothing. This is why typically when you see me, most of my clothing has dog hair on it. And there's always squirrels. There always must be squirrels in the post. So when we look at technology today, when we look at the state of the union and all the issues and all the challenges in it, we sometimes have to sit there and go, where does the challenge lie? We have, for many, many years, blamed humans. We have blamed end users. We have blamed the CFO. We've blamed the developers. We blame the network team. We're really good at basically blaming the folks that actually program the stuff these days. We're really good at that. What we're not good at doing is taking a step back, looking in the mirror and going, what can we do to change things? Which is why, basically, this is the status quo. It is. I mean, this is how it is. This is our conundrum. And not only is this our conundrum, and because we're in a hybrid identity protect conference, we don't know who hit this key. And if we think we know who hit the key, we don't know why. Because, unfortunately, as most of us do, and as most of us continue to do, we keep using Grandma's computer in North Korea to break into everything else. We don't use our own systems. If you're sensible and you're red teaming, you sure as heck don't use your own system. And if you're doing things that will probably get the attention of the various agencies, you sure as heck don't use. You use the neighbor's computer. How many of us have broken into next door neighbor's wireless network because it's not as well secured as ours and used that to launch attacks? Yes. I mean, you secure it afterwards to be nice. And you wipe the logs, obviously. But this is the dilemma that we're in. This country, among many, turn around and go, well, you know, if somebody attacks me, I want to hack back. The hell are you going to do? Bomb grandma? Really? That's not nice. She's never done anything wrong. She's just using the damn system. So we don't have a good way of dealing with attribution. In fact, we have a terrible way of dealing with attribution. I'm probably some of the worst at times. I've done it myself, unfortunately. And then the challenge becomes one of like, what if you do actually identify the person? How do you know what the morals and the ethics and the conversations behind that are? What is their motivation? Maybe what are they being forced to do? Alan and I did a podcast this morning, and we were talking about foreign nationals inside our organizations. He's worked for a company, I currently work for a company where we have all sorts of controlled material. We built some really cool things to reduce basically sonic boom footprints. That's cool stuff. I'd rather it didn't leave these shores if at all possible. So then I have to look at everybody inside my organization and not go, who are you? Or why are you? Or where are you? But maybe what pressures externally are being exerted upon you. Things that unfortunately a standard identity system is going to have a hard job dealing with. So that's where we have to take a step back, unfortunately, and look at the current state of cybersecurity and go, maybe we have a problem or two. Or if we be screwed, if we want to keep it simple. So then, if we don't think it's that, then maybe it's a technology problem. There's ways of fixing this, and we'll get to that in a minute, but let's blame the technology. It's another easy, simple avenue, and it's a simple avenue because I found this on Zillow. It was actually kind of cool. It was the escape cabin in the woods. How many of us have said we're done with technology, we're going to go hide in the woods? All of us. It's a Monday morning thing, isn't it? My Mondays, I have typically between 13 and 15 meetings on a Monday. Yeah. It gets busy. Around about midday, I'm like, what if I can escape to a cabin in the woods? And I'm like, that sounds like an ideal thing because I can get away from technology. Unfortunately, we don't get away from technology. This particular cabin in the woods was 10 minutes from the nearest intersection, came with Starlink, and when you got close to the technology, the Nest system that had been embedded in would automatically set the temperature to your desired system. I'm like, you bastards. Not only is it connected technology, it pwns everything that I want to get away from. Not only that, but then we have to take a step back. How many of you have had those days when in your own mind, the inner you from, I don't know, yesterday or 10,000 years ago is holding the club over your head and there's just this pile of dead bodies in front of you? Or am I the only one that goes through that? Some of you, all of you? Because literally, I mean, that's honestly what we want to do, isn't it? There are times, and that could be the CFO, it could be anybody, I mean, let's face it. But if in your own mind, you have reached this point by Monday afternoon, and you work the problem, kind of like we do in our industry, let's work the problem. How can, in this day and age, you get away with this? If you're smart enough to not take your telephone with you when trying to actually dispose of said individual, the car that you're driving is probably connected enough. And if the car's not driving, the lights that you went through were probably connected. The cameras that you went through on the motorway to get there were connected. If that didn't do it, probably the email that you sent implicates you that you sent the previous month or last month or the trending that you did. And if that and you get the idea. And if it isn't you, some other Muppet's recording something and putting it up on YouTube. So your ugly mug is now plastered all over the internet in a field in the middle of Idaho carrying a spade in one arm and the remains of somebody else. Trying to actually do that in this day and age is tough. So then we get to the point where we go, well, maybe there is no hiding. But some of you are like, aha, I have a way of doing it. To which point, we'll have a bit of a history lesson. For the last couple of years, I've been messing around with light bulbs. Having some fun with light bulbs. This is where we get geeky. And I'm like, okay, what's the history on light bulbs? And we go back to the 1800s. We actually go back further than probably most people think. Everybody thinks about Edison and Swan. It's like, oh, inventors of light bulbs. And I'm like, no, sorry. The Baltic pile in the 1800s, early 1800s. And then we have arc lamps. There were all sorts of other interesting stuff. And then Edison and Swan teamed up, and hey, presto, we got the regular standard kind of practical light that we've had for the last couple of hundred years. Fascinating history for any of you that want to do it. Not just for sheer shits and giggles, but when we have a traditional light bulb and we talk, it vibrates. Now, if it vibrates, it means we can listen to it. And there are two different ways of listening to it that are publicly known, shall we say. You have a sensor array, something called lamp phone. How many of you are familiar with listening in on light bulbs? Many of you said, yeah. Yeah. Let's just say some of us did this for a living a long, long time ago. This is fun stuff. But here's the problem with this kind of stuff. You kind of had to be relative proximity. It's like, you remember a few years ago when somebody got Alexa to actually do whatever they want to because they had to shine a laser on the stupid thing. Well, I'm like, that's a pain in the ass. Just break into the house. It's simpler. The problem today is we've decided to go all digital. So these are some of the various different digital light bulbs that are out there and available. Now think about this. Alan and I did the podcast this morning. And there were like, 40 or 50 light bulbs in that blasted room? Yeah. Billions. There's anywhere from like 8 to 14 billion light bulbs, I think, in the US alone. And the US holds about 1/3 of the amount of light bulbs that are floating around out there. Now, unfortunately, we've decided to put smart light bulbs. So there's only a few billion of those things floating around at the moment. But obviously, everybody's trying to be nice and happy and hippie and replace crappy ones with these ones, which I'm not sure if that's a good thing or bad. Now, the nice thing from a hacker's standpoint is we connect these darn things. We connect them to absolutely everything. For those of you that have been out to hacker summer camp, how many of you remember, was it the ARI, how the hell do you pronounce that? A-R-I-A, ARI. Do you remember that hotel? Aria, there we go, thank you, Aria. Remember the first time, I remember going out there for the first time, they just finished building and somebody said it had Zigbee. About 50 of us piled out of the rooms with all of our antennas and started to make friends with the hotel. Because, like you do. But we have now taken technology to such a point that we are proliferating it around every single system of ours. Now, the downside for those of us that used to listen in with light bulbs is we have a bit of a problem. Those stupid things don't do the same thing. However, if we take a step back and we go, okay, it's a digital light bulb. What can we do to the thing? Well, we can take it to pieces. So I ended up going out, and for those of you like, hey, how'd you get into research? You get into research by walking around Best Buy or Target or any other store that you want to go into and go, oh, that looks fun, and you buy it and you take it to pieces. Welcome to research. I picked up about 20 or 30 different light bulbs, and I started taking them to pieces, and there were some commonalities. There were common circuits, and there were common systems, and there were common components and common motherboards. So, like any good adversary will do, they don't just look at breaking your front door down, they'll look at your supply chain. They'll look at your third parties. They'll look at all the organizations around you and start going, hey, how do I get to you indirectly? Breaking down GE's front door or breaking down Philips or kicking down Google's door is a little tough. Not impossible, but it takes a little, it's effort. It's a pain in the ass to have to do. But if I go to the supplier and the manufacturer of some of these components and look at the firmware they're using and realizing it's actually not on an SFTP server, but it's on an FTP server, well, as a good upstanding member of society, I want to help them. So, you take a copy of the code and you take a look at it and you realize that not only is the code up on the FTP server, but also is the certificate that validates that the code is good. So being a good member of society, we take a copy of that certificate and then get into the code, and we realize that some of these are useful. There are two different types of light bulbs out there. There are the ones which you plug in and you hook up to an app and you can just do different colors. And there's the other type of light bulb that you can yell at the stupid thing through Alexa or directly at it and get it to change colors as well. Most of them use the same components. They just turn bits on and off. different firmware, same company. So you're like, I wonder if I can update the thing. The answer is yes, you can update the thing. Here's an update in progress. Please notice we have had to go back to the 1990s because we're messing around with changing baud rates, or baud rates. Baud or baud in this country? Baud. The bloody router. And it's Basil. So this is the fun. So not only do they have, I don't know, your SSD's encryption in plain sight and all the other things that they say they're going to have to do, but you can take it, you can reverse engineer it, you can use the master key that they have, and you can send it back, not just to the individual light bulb, but obviously, being a nice, upstanding member of society, we would also like to help and elevate their manufacturing process. So you realize where they're manufactured, you realize where the manufacturer's pulling down the FTP site and the updates for all of the source code, and maybe you make a couple of changes. For those of you that know me of old, I did this to John Deere many, many years ago to their tractors, because they were all like, we have connected tractors. And I'm like, I know you do, they're mine. And I was at a conference. It was ThoughtCon up in Chicago. It was like number 2 or number 3 in Chicago. This is years ago. And somebody had actually challenged me years ago to kill humans. I'm like, okay, that's kind of a fun thing to do. And I figured the easiest way to kill humans is to take food away. And I'm like, what's the easiest way to take food away? Well, you get in the way of the supply chain. So there was 2 of us that ended up working on this. What we ended up doing was getting into the tractor's code, the same way we're getting into this code, and we modified the code on the tractor. We modified it so that when you plugged in the PTC, which is basically the thing with all the seeds in it and some other bits and pieces, the tractor was like, oh, you're planting corn. And the first time it planted corn, it planted it at half the depth that it would normally plant it. So instead of the corn getting planted at like 2, 3, or 4 inches deep, it got planted at half that depth. Now, farmers are smart. If corn comes up too early, they're like, oh shit, this sucks. And they'll replant as quickly as they can. This arsehole put a loop in the assembly code that said, hi, if you see these coordinates and you see it going over the codes which we'd taken beforehand, plant it twice as deep. Yeah, arsehole move. We figured that we could affect between 80 and 85% of corn, barley, and wheat globally by taking out John Deere and Ford's tractors and just putting this code. We actually commented the code out. I ended up putting a smiley face in the code. Then we sent it to John Deere, and they were not happy. There's another cease and desist letter that ended up in the folder. So that's corn. So we kill humans, and we do that stuff. Now, we'll keep the humans, and we'll listen in on them instead. So this code went up to a number of the suppliers. The nice thing about it is, you start boiling the problem down, it's not 4 billion light bulbs. 4 billion light bulbs, 10 to 20 vendors, half a dozen suppliers, 2 different these, 2 different chip manufacturers, 2 FTP websites. If you would like the user ID and password, see me afterwards. So unfortunately, Grandma has now been pwned, courtesy of Grandma's light bulbs. Not only has Grandma been pwned, but Grandma, and I think it's now sitting on, I want to say last time I checked, it was about 1.2 billion light bulbs now running my commented out source code. So if any of you would like an extensive network of listening devices, again, see me afterwards. I don't take Bitcoin, I don't take Ethereum. I will take a check. Now the question is, why the hell do we care? Why? Why do we care about this stuff? It's fun to do, it's easy to do, it's playtime, but does it really affect anything? I don't know, good question. It makes it easier to listen in on people now. Here's why we should care. We go back to the humans. By the way, I will make sure these slides, if anybody wants, well, we're recording this for crying out loud. But if anybody wants the slides as well, see the wonderful folks from Simperis here as well, or yell at me and I'll send a copy of them. Here's a very, very simple statistic. We don't help people. We train and we teach to them. We, as an adversary, can get your stuff very quickly. One click, one simple, one 10% off coupon. It doesn't matter. It's easy enough to take the data. But unfortunately, as technologists, we educate in a way that means that people don't understand as often as they are being attacked. How many of you have awareness training inside your organization? Hopefully everybody's hands goes up. Okay. Once a year, once a quarter, once a day, once a year. So once a month. Thank you. I'll give you a hug afterwards. How many of you do it once a year? Or once a quarter? Now, this is America land, okay? You took a game that takes 5 days in my home country, home-ish country, I'm part English and part Scottish. You took a game that takes 5 days to play. It's called cricket. It's civilized. You took that game and you Americanized it into this weird thing called baseball. Okay, you took something civilized and you went click into this weird shit that goes on. You took a game of strategy, of tactics, and turned it into whack-a-mole. Okay? And you took something that takes 5 days and turned it into, I don't know, a couple of hours worth of a game. This shows the attention span of people that we are dealing with. Okay? You teach them once a year for 15 minutes. Don't click shit. Don't send shit. And P.S., if you do, we're going to yell at you. And you expect them to remember that for another 364 days. And we wonder why we failed. Not only do we do that, but then, just for shits and giggles, we send our own version of spam out to people because we want to fool them and make a fool of them. I made a promise when I stood up at the first all hands at Boom. I stood up and people were like, well, you know, I've worked for Lockheed and this and that. And they're like, oh, they'll send spam emails out and they'll try to fool me and I'll click shit and I'll get yelled at. I'm like, I will never do that to you. I will never send you a phishing email. I'm not that asshole. I won't do that to you. If I do, I'm going to warn you ahead of time. I'll spend a couple of weeks warning you that I'm about to do that to you because I want you to learn and understand. I don't want to make a fool out of you and I sure as hell don't want to make an enemy out of you. I need you to help and learn. When I started there, we started a CISO channel in Slack. We started all sorts of things, and we end up using Wiser for our awareness training, because guess what? The videos are 1.5 to 2 minutes long, and you can share them with your friends, family, and kids, and parents and grandparents. We are screwing around with this. Now, the team at Boom send me inbound spam. They're like, hey, Chris, there's this one. You can have some fun. I'm like, yes. I get text messages with screenshots of stuff that people have found because they know I'm going to go out and toast people because it's kind of fun to make an attacker's system melt if you know the right person. Yet this is where we're still at. So we have, as a human and as an organization, not still yet understood the identity. Never mind the identity of our attacker and our adversary, the very identities of the people that we're meant to be protecting. This is a human conversation to have. Change your own tactics. Because guess what? Once upon a time, some bright person put this out. And we forgot the first two. We were like, we'll take care of you. We'll put antivirus on, which, let's face it, endpoint protection with better marketing. We decided to basically put processes in place. Thou shalt not do something. But we forgot about the human aspect of things. We forgot about figuring out not only whose hands are on the keyboards, why they're on the keyboards, but maybe what's going on in their life. Why are they doing something? What pressures are happening? What's occurring outside of our environment? We all get bad days, believe me. There's a few of us, thankfully, nowadays. I love the fact that email now has an auto wait for 10, 20, or 30 seconds before it sends a flaming email that you wrote. We, as an industry, also don't have good accountability. We simply don't. How many of you effectively hold your vendors accountable? Okay, yet we still buy things from them. We still spend money. Do we spend money wisely, or do we spend it so we can put that tick in the box? I said tick in the box, not dick in the box. It's kind of the same thing, unfortunately, sometimes. But how many of us hold our vendors accountable? How many of us have turned our vendors into our partners? For those of you, we do the podcast on Wednesday morning. Danny Wolf and I do a podcast every Wednesday morning. And for those of you that listen in, every now and again, I reference a very amazing team from a company called Newspire. Maria Graham and the team over there aren't a vendor. They are a partner with us. When I turned up at Boom, I did the standard thing any CISO should do. First question out of my mouth was, how do I kill you? It's kind of fun. It's my standard basic thing to go to. It's like, how do I kill the company? And it's amazing. When you ask the CEO is like, well, we have the business and the market. Like, okay, great, I can kill the company. When you ask manufacturing, they're like, handful of sand in XB1 and we be screwed. When you ask finance, when you ask these other teams, you get all these other ideas and answers about how you could kill a company in 24 hours. And you put it all together, and then you go back to the team and you go, okay, I figured this shit out. Here's the data you care about. Here's this. Where is it? Because the second question any CISO should ask when they walk in is, what's my landscape? You've asked me to walk in and protect, but what the fuck am I protecting? In this case, with the Simperis folks, I'm protecting AD and doing a fucking good job of it, I'm going to point out. By the way, how many of you have actually downloaded and messed around with Purple Knight? Yay. Rest of you, do it. Please. Because that second question indicates if you don't know what you have, how the hell are you going to actually protect the damn stuff? If you haven't done, how many of you accurately know how many assets are in your network? Yeah, we're all about there. Yeah, exactly. It's like, kind of probably-ish, give or take a day or two. Okay. So why the hell are we going out and buying all sorts of other crazy shit when we don't even know what the hell we're protecting? Good question. Simple things. So if you haven't done the basic accountability question of what am I even trying to protect, why are we even moving on to the next step? Because the next step is, what have I got? Where is it? What's on it? Who the hell's got access to this stupid thing, which is where these guys all come into play? And then what do I do about it? Unfortunately, more often than not, we race straight to what do I do about it? Oh, I got to buy more stuff. Woohoo! No. Take a step back. Make friends with the rest of the business. I got somebody else hit me up online a couple of days ago. They put a LinkedIn post down like, oh, I'm having a problem with my, it was like the networking team. I'm having a problem with the networking team. They're not listening to me. I'm like, all right, what are you doing? Well, I'm going in and I'm talking to them. I'm like, first and foremost, you're an asshole. You don't go in and talk to somebody. You go in and you work with them. You talk with them. Well, they're not listening to me. I'm like, and how are you approaching it? The same way we're having this conversation. I'm like, get your fucking ass out. Go down to Dunkin' Donuts. Pick up a bloody 5-gallon thing of coffee and an entire 12 dozen donuts. And walk in and go, hey, I'm sorry. For the last 5 years of this company, I've been a special snowflake, and I apologize. How can we work on this, please? Go do it. Expense it if you really have to. Simple stuff. The human aspect of things. Again, it's not a technology problem. This is how do we become accountable. We as an industry have blamed everybody else for a long time. All of us probably need to go look in the mirror for a second and go, how can we change how we do things? Part of the reason I like hanging out with this crew here is because it's a different way of dealing with things. Which brings us to the language. I learned this one years ago. Years and years ago, I reported into the CFO. This was a fantastic learning lesson for me. Gosh, it's probably 15 plus years ago now. One of the first senior leadership positions. I had an old Italian CFO in Chicago. If I couldn't explain to him in 3 tries what I wanted, snowball's chance in hell of getting it. Probably one of the best learning things I ever went through for that focus thing. It made me walk in there prepared more effectively and more efficiently. It made me understand what the hell communication is in a different language. It wasn't necessarily walking in there and spouting off CFO-ish type stuff, but it was walking in there and it was going, how do we collaborate? How do I help you learn some of my world, but also understand your world so that we are both comfortable with whatever the solution actually should be for the benefit of the company? As we talk to users, change the language. I hate acronyms. I have an abject hatred for the stupid bloody things. We're almost as bad as the military. How many of you are former .mil or .gov? We love our freaking acronyms, but we don't keep making the stupid things up every week because marketing's decided that we need to be better than somebody else. I mean, we make them up to piss off the Air Force, but I mean, that's just a different conversation altogether. But we don't keep making things up. In this industry, every sodding week, somebody decides they need to stick out a bit more, and they change endpoint detection into whatever the hell the latest version of it is. Stop it. Speak a language everybody understands. This was stark yesterday. This was really starkly kind of hit me up yesterday. How are we doing time-wise? Are we good? What time am I talking till? Oh, wow. Oh, we got plenty of time. We'll do Q&A in a second as well. I was walking on the streets here yesterday, and there was, as there are in the streets of New York, there was there were two people against a sign. It was one of the more famous signs. Two people against a sign sitting there, and they'd handed a phone to somebody, which is a stupid thing to do. Don't ever hand your phone to anybody. They'd handed their phone to a very nice lady. I don't have my phone on me. There's a very nice lady who stood there trying to take a picture of these two people against this backdrop. Now, you and I will look at the phone and realize she's holding the phone the wrong way around. She's actually holding the screen facing the people. Kind of doesn't work that way. You and I look and go, the hell are you doing? She had no clue. Nobody had handed her an iPhone or an Android before. She's trying to take a picture the same way. The lens goes towards the people. Lens is the big thing. Hold it. No. How many other people on this planet would be in the same boat? 4, 5 billion, maybe 6? There's 5.5 billion connected people on this planet, most of which we haven't figured out who the hell they are. But how many of them are we trying to talk in a language that we're comfortable with, yet they have no freaking clue? Simple, simple things. Again, we need to identify who the heck the person is on the other end of that keyboard to figure out how we help them. I have done an entire talk about a dick in a box. Because let's face it, that really is all compliance is. We have taken a simple thing and complicated the crap out of it. Not only have we complicated the crap out of it, we have taken the spirit of what compliance is meant to be and bastardized it to a point where we now have lawyers arguing not only among each individual area, rule, or line, but we can't even agree on what bloody compliance framework to fucking use. Good gods, how fractious and crap can we make ourselves? One rule, protect thou's shit. Nothing else is needed. PCI, how many of you remember PCI 20-ish years ago and HIPAA 20-ish years ago? Yeah, how many of you helped build the fucking thing? It was meant for the right reasons. We started off with a simple rule, have a firewall. We thought that'd be enough. People will figure this shit out. They have a firewall. Doesn't mean they've taken it out of the freaking box. Rule number 2, take thou's firewall out of the box. Well, you didn't say you had to plug the damn thing in. Rule number 3, plug fucking firewall in. You didn't tell me I couldn't have any on it. I'm like, really? We have to tell you this stuff? We're adults. And then what happens is, well, I don't like your PCI rule. I'm going to have my... This is England. This is colonial England. I don't like your rule. I have my own flag. I'm going to take over your place. So then HIPAA was like, screw you, we're going to have our own. Then the government was like, well, we don't like any of yours. We're going to have our own. And then marketing, I mean, how many of these stupid things do we have? 20, 30 of the damn things? And then like anything else, Europe was like, well, you buggers are a pain in the ass over in America. We're going to have our own. Seriously. This is ridiculous. Change. Stand up, get a voice, start complaining, please. Because it's going to take all of us to effect this change. So some final thoughts, and then we'll have Q&A. I assume there's questions. There better be questions. Before I do final thoughts, there is, thank you to the Semperis crew and to Alan, a Lunchies and Munchies for those of you that have a what is it? CIO and CISOs. Yes. Who else? See Alan and see anybody else that wants to put their hand up and take ownership. Yeah. So this is a fun one for a couple of different reasons. It's in because, again, we don't have to deal with this as a technology solution. This is a human solution. But there's also a call out here. Again, for those of you that follow me on LinkedIn, I'm fairly open about what goes on in my head on a regular basis. So this is also a call out for every single one of us in here. Go look in the mirror and ask yourself, how am I doing as a human? And if necessary, step the hell away from the keyboard. Believe me, it'll still be there. And if the place is actually burning down, people probably know how to get hold of you. But get the hell out. Take a mental break. Find a happy space, be it at the range, out in the middle of the woods, in my case, hugging Milo or whatever it is. I'm actually I'm building a set of talks at the moment. For those of you who remember me from like last year, I was a slightly different size than I am now. Health and Mother Nature has a way of slapping some sense into some of us. So I've had to learn this one really, really, really closely for a whole bunch of different reasons. I'm actually doing a talk on hacking my own body. I'm actually wearing a sensor that I have to wear now all the time. And so I'm actually doing an entire talk on how to hack my own body. And it's been very, very, very eye-opening. And so here is my ask. There's getting less and less of us out there. And those of us that are there are unfortunately occasionally taking things into our own hands. Let's try not to add to those statistics. You got problems. This is family. Again, the nice thing about the Semperis crew is they've put us all together. This isn't just a working session. This is friends, family, and community. Rely on it, please. Here's the other one. People don't change without a reason. Now, there is, when I'm in a spicy mood, the simple desire just to kill more people to prove a point. Unfortunately, there are laws against doing that. So we have to find a better or a different way to do this. How do we encourage people to change? How do we work with people on change? How do we take a step back with the older and the younger generation and help them understand why change might be necessary? The digital world and the physical worlds, they've been colliding for a while now. When we make a mistake in our digital realm, it is a drastic change in the physical realm at times, to the point where it's simple. We fuck up in the digital realm, we have, unfortunately, the ability to kill people in the physical realm. Let's try not to let that happen too often, please. So again, how do we affect change? How do we help people understand it? Kind of one of the final slides, because I like this one. For all of you in this industry, for all of you actually mentoring people coming into this industry, for all of you online and everything else, we have one job. That's it, one simple job. It isn't to make an empire. It isn't to get out there and do anything else other than simply protect. That's why hopefully most of us are in it. Yes, the bills get paid, which is rather nice. And yes, we can have nice watches and nice cars and all sorts of other crazy shit. But we have one simple job. Again, part of the reason I like the mentality of the folks that have put this on. They have a mission. Their mission is simple. How do we protect? To do that, we still have to know whose hands are on the keyboard and who's behind the keyboard and why. So, I have one simple ask. Let's do it right. So that is the end of the official slides. All right, I'm listening. Sorry, we squirreled.
No worries.
Go for it, Mike.
I got a question. The Electricity Reliability Council of Texas, the big ERCOT 30 seconds away from being blasted back to a black start event, Stone Age for the entire grid. You know, do you have any cleverness to share? Because I'm focusing on critical infrastructure and maritime security these days.
Yeah, let's get the basics done.
Yeah. So what clever thoughts can you share about? Because I think what happened in Texas, I'm not making fun of them. It's going to happen to us as soon as an adversary decides to mess up New York or some
Well,
other
okay,
metro.
so I don't, it doesn't matter if it's Texas or Colonial Pipeline or whoever the hell it is. Here's the problem with humans. How many of you remember as kids walking into the kitchen, the very first time you kind of cognizantly remember walking into the kitchen and your parent or guardian was like, hey, there's the kettle or there's the stove, it's hot, don't touch it. What did we do? Yeah, how many of us got burnt? Okay. That's great in the physical world. You've affected one person, typically your hand or your finger or your forehead if you're like me, and you got burnt. That's great. One person, one system, one whatever. You mess with the Colonial Pipeline, you mess with a power grid here, or like some of us have done, make lights blink and send brood messages to the space station, and you screw that up, you affect the lives of tens, hundreds, thousands, millions of people. Don't wait for the I told you so moment before doing something about it. Don't have the excuse, I don't have money, I don't have time, I don't have the effort. There are ways around that. There's prioritization conversations that have to happen. To me, that's what part of it comes down to. It also comes down to conversations. Very simply, Boom at the moment is in a hunker down mode. Building airplanes, building engines is rather expensive. We finally announced it. Actually, we announced today. I think I saw the post. We didn't, I'm going to get yelled at. So when this goes online, we'll be fine. We finally announced today that XB1, which is our experimental jet, got flight certification aware. We can fly the stupid thing. That's a fucking huge milestone for 5 years worth of building. Yeah, wait until the stupid thing gets up in the air. Then we'll have that. Then we'll drink. So where was I going with this? We were having the conversation basically. I'm lost where I was going with that, completely lost. Prioritization, thank you. We're in hunker down mode because building planes is expensive. Thank you for that, I needed that. We're hunkered down, which means basically when I want to go spend some money to do something, I actually have to go and have a very, very interesting conversation, but I will still do that. I will take the time, take the effort, and I will educate. I will also work with the rest of the business and go, where does this fall in the prioritization? Where does this fall when it comes to business continuity? Where does this fall when it comes to potential, not risks, but probability? Risk is simple, it's a constant. Probability is what's variable. We can have that conversation about mathematics at some point in time. This is not a risk conversation, it is a probability conversation. Okay? Alan and I, remember that podcast we did on risk? No, I don't remember, I did risk 70. This is a conversation that we need to have with the business and go, hey, pipeline, perfect example. You have thousands of miles of pipeline, congratulations. People like me will go into the middle of nowhere and plug into your pipeline and go have fun with it. How would we know? What simple things can we do? You're not always going to be able to protect, we know that, but how quickly can I understand and how quickly can I recover? The grid is a perfect example. We've known the grid's vulnerable for more years than I care to think of. Silence, please. Thank you. We have also realized that we build redundancy into place. If we lose this, what can we do to filter it? So I think there's things we can do from a business standpoint. But I also think, again, it comes down to communication. It comes down to sitting down with the CFO or with leadership, and rather than blaming them and saying, I have no money, go stand in front of them. I'm doing it with the board in noon, I think, which is 10 a.m. Mountain Time. I got to sit down with the board in an hour and a half's time, and I'll have a board conversation about probability. I'll have a board conversation. I'm actually using NIST's good old NIST cybersecurity framework to explain to the board where we're at, where we want to be, where we need to be, and how we get there. It's a journey. And they have understood it to the point where we can now make educated decisions together. I don't have to go in and argue. I have to go in and we have a conversation as to what's best for the business. Now, sometimes what's best for the business is that they don't want to deal with it. So then I build a safety net behind the scenes. Because I can't fix everything. But what I can do is put protections in place for when something might or might not occur. In other words, somebody like me gets in, plugs in the pipeline 300 miles out of the middle of bugfuck nowhere, and I affect change. Well, great. How will you know that? How quickly will you know that? Who's watching the logs? Well, we've got Newspire in place. I'm not going to build a knock or a sock. I'm going to hand that data to somebody I trust. And guess what? Hell of a lot cheaper than actually me building a knock or a sock. And so far, touch wood, more effective. So you find those partners you trust, and you go, how do I deal with it? And if I can't afford to buy it, guess what? I'll negotiate harder with a vendor, or I'll go look at the open source world, because they got some really freaking cool tools too. And worst case scenario, we've done it before at Boom, and I've done it at other companies. I'll bring people in on an interim basis, or I'll bring interns in, because if I bring interns in and I can affect change and I can show progress, then I have a better conversation to go back to the business and go, hey, look, we just ran this project for 6 months, and everybody kicked ass. Let's go further. And the business is like, holy shit, that was cool. Let's do it. I'm doing it now. I haven't officially announced it, but we're here and among friends. I'm building an artificial model. Basically, I'm building an intelligence model for the airplane. I'm actually changing, I've been building it in Rust for like the last 4 to 6 months. I hate Rust, by the way. I'm now rebuilding it in Python, long conversation, but basically I'm taking, so far, almost a dozen narrow AI models of everything from avionics, fuselage, wing systems, profiles, passengers, meteorological data, and all sorts of other stuff, and building a model, and then I'm feeding it into basically 3 full AI models that I've built, half of, and used some other bits, and I have a decision envelope. That decision envelope tells me what the plane should be doing, needs to do, what it did yesterday, what it should do today, what it will do tomorrow, and if it varies from that probability model, I get to know about it. And what I'm also building in, the FAA is going to kill me for this, it'll be fun doing it anyway, is I'm building a self-healing into it. Playbooks. So the plane, if it is under an attack or it's under a stress or an issue, can make its own decisions as to how it needs to fix itself. I'm doing that in my spare time with fuck all budget. I'll build it, I'll prove it, and then I'll go back to the business and go, hey, guess what? I can self-heal the airplane. Now let's get some budget to put this into production. So there's stuff like that. Recognized a problem, dealt with it, got a couple of us around it, and we're all having some fun doing it. So there's ways of solving stuff. Worse than a digital twin. It's like a digital evil twin. But yes, and it's not just of the engine, it's of the entire plane. Yeah, I'm having some serious fun with that. What I'm hoping is if I built it properly, I can take it into the maritime world, and I can take it into the... How many of you have fucked around with trains? Like literally had fun with... So much fun. If you literally want to go hack something, just plug into one of those electrical boxes like 20 miles out of the middle of bugfuck nowhere. User ID and passwords are actually on the internet. Electrologics has them, and you can buy one of those systems on the internet, on eBay, and it's so much fun. I mean, don't do it, but do it. All right, sorry, we screw up. But yeah, there's ways of solving these problems. I think better than the traditional way that we've been dealing with them. In other words, we've got to get a little bit innovative. All right, other questions?
How has the conversation changed today from 10 years ago with the board or the C-suite regarding cyber security and ROI?
So I like that. A quick show of hands. How many of you are C-suite people that report out to the board? Crap, get your hands up. Seriously, is there like 4 or 5 of us? Oh, that scares me. All right, so hold me accountable to this. Or yell at me, I'm fine either way. First and foremost, we're at the table. I think that's probably the biggest change. We are now involved and engaged in many of those conversations, not all of them. I still get surprised by things. We ended up announcing like middle of last year that we were doing this deal with like Rockwell Collins or whoever the hell it is that builds ways. The first I knew about it was when my threat intel went from me monitoring 30 countries to monitoring now like 70 something. I'm like, what happened? And then I looked at the news and I'm like, you bastards. And then had a conversation with my C-suite. So I think first and foremost, we're at the table. We get to know more. Would agree or disagree? Agreed? Agreed, yeah. That's the first one. Secondly, I would also say, and this is coming from somebody who's hardcore geek, we have recognized that we also have to change our ways. This is somebody who used to blame my grandmother for the internet going wrong and who used to blame everybody else as well. But I also recognize the fact that that doesn't work. We can't be the special snowflakes. We have to go in and go, how do we collaborate? So I think that's also a change. Agreed? Okay.
Still work in progress.
Will not disagree. I walked into a major car manufacturer in the middle of freaking Ohio, and the information security team was sulking, literally fucking sulking, because, well, the network team went and bought their own SIM, and we're going to buy a different SIM. I'm like, you assholes. I literally called them a bunch of assholes. I'm like, you fucking entitled assholes. get your ass out there and go apologize to that network team because you fucking pissed them off enough they went off and did their own thing. Go get coffee, go get donuts, and go apologize. It was a little blunter than that, but that was about the method. And so I think the fact is we've recognized that we can't fix the problem ourselves. I think that's maybe number 3. We can't fix this problem ourselves. We've tried. We've thrown tech at it. We've thrown everything at it, and we've realized that this isn't something we can solve. This is the whole, how does everybody together figure this out? And I think perfect way. It's a work in progress, but I think we've recognized. Agree, disagree? Yeah, it isn't perfect, not by a long stretch.
When it comes to being thrown under the bus, this whole paradigm that the CISO is the scapegoat, the chief information sacrificial officer, all the jokes we have, we're the only C-suite that tries to have it 2 ways. We try to say we don't own the risk, we advise.
Ooh.
And then we try to say we want a seat at the table.
Yeah, that's
Everyone else with a C title owns. It's that simple.
No, that's true. Will not, cannot, I'm not going to disagree, because at the end, I still stand up and go, we don't own the data.
Yep.
We will work with the business, especially in the stuff we do, we will work with the business to understand the data, and we will work to help understand the classification of that data, and then we will build mechanisms around it, and then we will actually audit it.
Yeah.
I say we because I'll keep separation there because I'm not the fox guarding the hen house. But yeah, you're right. No, that's fair. If you want to
I'm
go,
on DNO.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm on DNO as well. Yeah.
Well,
actually, that's
the one thing I hold out for.
Actually,
People talk about exit packages and parachutes and all that other stuff. When I walk into a new CISO gig, DNO is the only thing I hold steady for.
That's actually a really good thing. Sorry, this is actually
do it without.
So hang on, this is a really good thing. This actually might be something for a CISO channel for all of us. How many of you that are in leadership roles walked in and understood how to negotiate your contract outside of just the money and the time off and the stress mechanisms? How many of you understood to talk about directors and officers insurance and to talk about liability and risk? How many of you, quick show of hands, how many of you actually did that? Yeah. Not the first time. No, I mean, that's where I was. I mean, it took me a few times before I'm like, holy smoke, I can actually be part of that? Yeah, let's have that conversation. This actually might be something worthwhile running you two need to run a workshop on this. I think it'd be, how many of you would think that would be useful? Negotiating your next leadership contract and what the hell to think about. All right, done.
Just wanted to say that vulnerability landscape, the smart light bulb,
yeah,
special in a way, but so many other systems are being internet connected and have entry points into something. So it's just not just the human factor anymore.
Here's the other one. Who's got a smartphone on them? Can I borrow for a sec? Yeah, smart move. Fucking awesome. Here's why. Here's why. And not just for that reason. I'll give you another reason why the landscape is about to really freaking change. I'm doing some work with some folks. DARPA. I've been working, for the last couple of years, I've been working on mapping my brain. So I have a pair of glasses at the house that actually have sensors built into them, built them ourselves, and they pull signals out of the brain. And I've got it to the point now where if I walk down into my area and I'm actually thinking of my computer, not blinking and not thinking of the lights around me, which for me, squirrels, that ain't easy. If I'm thinking of my computer and my computer's recognizing between the two of us, my computer opens. I've also got it so as it's monitoring me, ironically enough, it knows when I want a cup of tea, it knows when I want biscuits, it knows, and I've got it doing other things. It now learns and understands me, I learn and understand it. Now, fast forward, I've also been working with nanotech and biotech, basically hacking the human body. Not to the extent that the media thinks that we can do, but we're getting there. We're at a point now where not only can we write into DNA, but we can take data out of DNA, and we've been able to do that for a little while. So the ability now, not just to basically attack him remotely, but to take his phone and get hands-on and start siphoning data out that way, that's there. So now your attack vectors aren't just me dicking around with that kind of stuff. It's tactile. Simply, literally putting hands on a system and eventually being able to extract data that way, that's what's coming down the pipeline. Okay? We still can't even get people to add 7, 8, 9 onto the end of their 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 password. Okay? We're not only currently screwed, we be screwed long term. So we have to figure this out. Again, it's a human problem. Take the tech out of it, look at the teams here, and go, how do we change? So with that, I'm going to shut the heck up. Thanks ever such a ton. I'm loving it. Huge thanks to everybody putting this on.